Welcome to Healing Your Family Legacy, here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. Innovative, evidence-based recovery that helps to identify intergenerational trauma, allowing for freedom and embracement of the healing process. Today, episode 62, Dance with Addiction, Part 1. And now your host, Dr. Donna Bevan-Lee.
This is Dr. Donna Bevan-Lee, helping you heal your family legacy. As all of you know who have been listening to this podcast, I've been talking about addictions for the last few sessions because childhood trauma fuels addiction. And most people don't know that. Most people who are struggling with addiction don't know that. I noticed in AA, when I was first in AA, that people talked about their trauma and made people laugh, kind of like a flippant, this happened to me, and, ha, 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 everybody would laugh. And then they'd talk about the things they did, like on their fourth step, like, oh, I robbed a bank, or, I beat up my little sister, or whatever. And they would just be overcome with shame and sadness and pain. And so, as I have worked in this field, I realized that that's kind of backwards. And so today, I have asked a good friend of mine, a very good friend of mine, and someone who's been on the road to recovery with me, to talk about her experiences, both as a recovering addict and recovering person from childhood trauma. And so I have asked her to come on today. She can use whatever name she wants. But so here she is. Tell us about yourself.
Hi, I'm Jen Wallace. I'll use my actual name.
Okay, thank you, Jen. That'll make it easier for me.
My life is pretty much an open book these days. So addiction, something that I've had some experience with in my time on this planet. And I heard in a 12-step meeting one time, our addictions have many hosts. So that was certainly true of my experience. And I can trace that back to my childhood trauma. And what I think my overall experience with that trauma and how it landed on me was that I was at war with myself. Mm-hmm. And so how those addictions manifested was anything that could take me away from myself.
Like what?
Substances. Once I discovered alcohol, I was off to the races. That was a substance that could put me at ease, offer me some confidence. And of course, that also reduced some of my inhibitions. And so as I went into my teenage years and my sexuality was coming to the forefront, that was another place. I sought love and attention sexually and acted out accordingly, typically after being fueled by alcohol. And so some of those other struggles that I had in my teenage years, as I've been thinking about my story and sharing that with you today, that I just, any form of self-harm that could take me away from some of that emotional pain and move me into some physical pain to be more my focus. I was a cutter. I also would consume food and then throw it up, and just exercised a lot. And when I fell for somebody, when I had an attraction to somebody, they became my obsession. So pretty much anything that could take me away, I was addicted to it. And that really, I tried to manage and control that. Didn't really have any tools as a teen. Fortunately, I had a couple of mentors in my life at that time in sports, which were really helpful. Sports really kind of helped me get through a lot of things in my younger ages. But in my 20s, I made a decision at some point to join a career in law enforcement. And it was almost as if it was a conscious decision for me because I'd fallen in love with women. I wasn't really comfortable with my sexual orientation. And I'd fallen in love with some friends, teammates, and didn't work out. I wasn't prepared, nor were they prepared to really act on those feelings. And I found myself in these obsessive behaviors and just a lot of messiness, what I consider to be really messy interactions when my heart was involved. So when I was making that decision to go into law enforcement, I wanted to just flip a switch, to turn off my heart and just live in my head. And you can probably guess that maybe that didn't work. So
Not usually.
But I had a focus, and I had a meaningful career ahead of me, and felt really fortunate to have gone into that career and didn't want anything to interfere with it. And I also had a security clearance and a background investigation that were part of me getting that job. So I really wanted to contain any of that, of what I perceived a messiness, whether it was with alcohol or relationships, to the extent that I could.
So you chose law enforcement because of its like kind of rigid boundaries where you had to behave in a certain way. It's like the rules of law enforcement are really clear, right? It's like you can't get DUIs. Yeah. You can't be acting out. In fact, back then, I guess, that you couldn't even be lesbian. Like you just had to live within a really, and that helped you feel more in control of yourself? Was that part of the reason that you chose that?
Absolutely. Wow. There was that service component as well. And I wanted to feel good. I needed something that was going to make me feel good about myself. And it had lots of other bells and whistles along with it. But I think that ability that I had to maintain this life of order and discipline was something that attracted me to that field. And I remember going through that first background investigation, and although there was part of me that wished I'd had some kind of physical or sexual experience with another woman prior to that, but was also relieved that I hadn't, because it could have interfered with me getting that clearance at that time.
Because that was when? Like what year-ish?
That was in the 80s.
Yeah, that would have been a hard situation. You wouldn't have passed background check.
That's exactly right. And I didn't want anything to interfere with that, because that was such an important goal to me. And those external goals, I could set my sights on those external goals like that, whether they were related to sports or career, but didn't have any really emotional capacity to live an integrated life at that time.
Okay.
So my 20s were a mess.
Sounds like it. Wow.
Where I was trying to really contain myself. I was coming out, and I moved back to my hometown. I went to college in Northern Virginia, played soccer for that school, and did an internship with the same agency that hired me. And I got to move back to my hometown, which I thought was a blessing, but it turned out to be a bit of a challenge. First coming out, that was challenging. And having this career, it was suddenly what I had tried to avoid, that mixing of my heart and my body, that I had to, and my head, that I was in this career, and that I was trying to contain those emotions, or certainly the expressions of it. And so I engaged in some pretty destructive behaviors that I would consider, looking back on today. And, as I was coming out, I was seeking those relationships with women who were unavailable in some way, whether they didn't live in the area or they were in another relationship. That was typically those were typically the types of women I got involved in. So
they were safe.
They were safe.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Destructive,
they were,
but safe. Yeah. Right.
Right. Because I didn't have to fully commit. build a life with them. I didn't know that. I didn't want that. I didn't understand that or have that kind of capacity through my 20s. So at about midway through my 20s, I got assigned to a national investigation, a national sexual assault investigation, which very much motivated me in my career. And even then, as I was coming out, and I felt like I had to just suppress that side of my life because I had this important work to do, and I was going to be traveling. I ended up traveling all over the country, primarily to interview victims of sexual assault on the tailhook investigation, as well as pilots who were accused of sexually assaulting women at this convention. And so my personal life was a bit of a mess at this time when I was assigned this really critical case. And so what I had to do, I remember, going into it feeling like I had to have that order and discipline, that I couldn't drink because I couldn't predict what would happen when I drank. And I could just completely throw myself, another addiction, the work addiction. I could throw myself into my work 24/7. And I did that for a little over a year. There were some moments in between, sometimes with some misbehaviors, I like to say, in between, some indiscrepancies during that year because I couldn't fully control it. I was an addict. And but part of what happened during that investigation was that I was able to be assigned. I got rewarded for my work on that case with a geographic to Seattle. I got to leave that environment that I had so badly, in my opinion, disrupted in relationships that were, hanging on a string because of my betrayal, various forms of betrayal of friends and relationships and so forth. I almost felt like I was going to get run out of, if I didn't move, I was going to get run out of town by the lesbian community there. Yes.
So did you wonder, why do I keep doing this? Did you wonder about that? Were you aware that, I keep doing this same thing over and over again, expecting different results, right? Like, I'm going to fall in love, I'm going to find somebody, and then have a fantasy, I guess, of settle down, blah, 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 right? Were you wondering, why do I keep doing this to myself and others?
I just thought I was intrinsically flawed.
Okay, so there's the bad seed thing. I'm a bad seed. I'm flawed.
I'm a bad.
Well, that must have been baffling to you, because here you were in this big, investigation, doing all this really important work, and then over here on the personal side, you're wreaking havoc with, other women, right? This is where you're doing your drinking. And so it must have felt very bizarre for you to be in this really important job, and then, your life is falling apart.
Yeah. I felt like I was living a double life.
Well, you kind of were, it sounds like. Yeah.
Kind of was. Yeah. And I thought that maybe where I lived was the problem.
Yeah, it's a geographic problem, all right. Yeah. So you got the geographic cure because they sent you to Seattle.
I don't think I could have moved farther away.
You couldn't, unless you moved to Japan or somewhere, right?
That's right. Yeah, my parents were also going through a divorce at the time, so it was a perfect exit strategy for me to move clear across the country and start a new life. And I expected that with that new life and the same job, I was going to work for the same agency in the same role, that I expected to have new behaviors.
Right.
I thought that
the geographic cure.
This was a total transformation.
If I could just get away.
If I could just get away from all of these people who are alcoholics.
There you go. All those people, those alcoholics, right?
All those people who drink. I don't think I used the term alcoholic. I probably said who drink a lot.
Oh, right. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It wasn't really who drink too much. Right. Like that's I'm with this crowd of people who drinks too much. It's not me. It's
them.
It's the people around me, and it's the location, because there's a lot of praise or a lot of attention in that town to happy hours and drinking in every town.
Well, and don't you think back, in the 80s, the only place you could really find other gay people were either bars or on sports fields for women, right?
Yep. And those were my places.
Right. And so there was no way to socialize or find other people like you or me, as it turned out. But there was no other place except a bar, really, that you could socialize, because you're not really socializing on a soccer field. You're playing soccer. So socialize, meeting people, dancing, doing all that. It's the only place. There was no other place. If you went to another place, you could find yourself in situations where you could be outed. I'm using air quotes for that, where people would say, oh, look, there she is. Let's tell her employer, right? I mean, you couldn't go places. So I think that was an important piece of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And as I moved to Seattle, just kind of like when I was going into law enforcement, I was not going to do some of the same things.
Of course not.
That I did in Syracuse. I was not going to play sports or hang out at bars. I was going to have a life of culture. I was going to, go to the symphony, spend time in museums, and
where you'd meet lots of lesbians, right? I mean, we do have culture, but that's not usually where you meet other lesbians, because they're all just looking at art or being in a cultural situation. Right. So that's social.
Well, when I moved to Seattle, I was in a relationship with a woman who lived in Japan at the time. So I thought I was safe in that respect. But that wasn't a deterrent from either women or bars, because I got lonely. Work was only a certain number of hours a day, certain number of days of the week. And as much as I tried to throw myself into my investigations, it just wasn't sufficient to sustain me. So I started to, go out to bars alone. And, before I knew it, I was in two relationships. One in Seattle and one in Japan. And that didn't work so well either. But it was just this constant, one of the things that did happen when I moved to Seattle is ultimately when I found that I was in those same tendencies of going to bars, and I actually met somebody at a bar who played on a soccer team, I ended up joining a soccer team. And that turned out to be a really great thing for me, because I met some women who are professionals, teachers, lawyers, doctors, who were part of this team, and they didn't have the same obsession with drinking as I did. It didn't take me long to figure that out. That they would have events and parties from time to time, but they didn't drink like I did. They didn't bring beer to every soccer meeting or soccer practice or anything like that. So I could, even from that group of who I felt were my peers, I stood out with my consumption of alcohol. Like, I was the one who always wanted more. And that was true for a few years into my late 20s, when a couple of those friends had the courage and kindness to tell me the truth, or to ask me or question my drinking, my level of drinking. And that's, my mom had tried to do the same thing years before, and I threw out the lesbian card to send her on another
I bet
trail.
that worked.
That didn't work so well. With either. That was not a deterrent to either. But I had, as you might guess, a sense that I was struggling with alcohol, my alcohol intake, and that when I drank alcohol, that things happened, things that I didn't, I was engaging in behaviors that were embarrassing, that I was ashamed of, that I was, acting out sexually in ways that were not according to what I thought were my values. So I wasn't leading the life that I expected to lead in Seattle when I moved to Seattle.
So you had that conflict of values. This is what I think, this is what I believe, this is what I think is good behavior, and this is what keeps happening to me. So, when we talk about addiction, we talk about loss of control. And it's not just loss of control over your drinking, because it sounds like that was one of the things that was happening, but it's loss of control over what I say and do, right? And then the next day, now I realize what I say and do, I feel shame and guilt, pain, sad, self-recrimination. And so what do? Drink some more.
Bringing more chaos.
It's like, I got to get rid of this. This feels too bad. And, after that first or second drink, and by then you've lost control again, then I feel better, but then I feel worse. Because at some point, there's not enough booze, there's not enough drugs to make all of that go away, right?
Right. And I couldn't find peace. No. I didn't have that inner peace that I understand and live with today. That I was, I had, as I mentioned about that childhood trauma, the beginning of the war I was having with myself, and that was just perpetuated and magnified anytime I drank alcohol, because I never knew what would happen. And sometimes I didn't, when I would go into blackouts and wasn't certain about what happened.
That must have been horrifying.
So it was horrifying. It was horrifying, particularly given my role as a special agent with the Defense Department.
Not good. No.
That I couldn't contain those behaviors. Like I felt like I was kind of spinning out of control. So when those friends asked me about my drinking and expressed some concern, it made me want to maybe do something about it. Maybe. I also recognized that alcohol was a form of, it was a bit of a coping mechanism.
A bit. Sounds like a lot.
Help me get through it. What I was getting through, I didn't really know, because externally, I seemed to be living the life of my dreams by having this apartment on Capitol Hill in Seattle, the city I wanted to live in a beautiful brick building with hardwood floors, a career, friends. I felt like externally I had it all, but there was something that was dying.
And you didn't know what that something was.
I did not know what it was. I just know that I would wake up in the middle of the night and feel that isolation, particularly when I was alone, this desperation and fear. Fear. I had a loaded service weapon, really accessible to me. And
did you contemplate suicide?
Yes.
And how often do you think you did that?
It's hard to say, and I would, it was times that in those moments of desperations, and when I really hated myself for saying something or doing something that caused that self-loathing, that those were the times. And I can't put a number on that. I just know that there was a point that seemed like a viable option to me.
So once it seemed like a viable option, do you think consciously or subconsciously that it stayed a viable option for you?
I think there was a part of that lingered. I think when I was conscious and I was in my, super special agent role, that was as far away as it could be from me. But it was those, the middle of the night terrors that I would awake to that caused me to consider that as a possibility.
Do you think it was, do you think on, say, a scale of 1 to 10, where would you on the possibility of doing that? with 10 meaning you've already done it.
Yeah. I think I was 6 or 7.
Wow, that's high.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was at a particular point. I was in a long distance relationship, and that ended, and I felt like I was spiraling out of control. And so I know at that point, and that was just prior to me not quitting drinking. I mean, that was just before I got the help that I needed. That I was doing this spiral out of control, and I kept, part of my conflict was I didn't want to do anything about seeking help because I had this security clearance. And in this, I know this doesn't seem like an epiphany, but to me it was. There was a day that I had this epiphany of, well, if I'm dead, my security clearance is irrelevant.
True. Wow, that is quite an epiphany.
Yeah. So this little bit, it felt like this little life force in me came to the surface. And that's when I got to that point where I was ready and willing to ask for help. I had just started seeing a therapist at that time who was suggesting maybe alcohol was destructive for me. And I was like, no, I don't think I'm going to give that up. So I was still kind of experimenting with it, maybe tapering, but at the same time, emotionally, I didn't know where to go with that. And so, but then when I had that realization that a security clearance was irrelevant if I was dead, that I sought help. I actually literally got down on my knees and had a phone call from a friend I hadn't heard from in a while that just kind of started to, that was surprisingly about a friend of a friend's suicide. That really, the timing of that made me recognize that this was serious, and that, and I didn't admit this to that friend at the time, but that I knew that I needed to get some pretty intense help.
And did you go to treatment?
I did go to treatment. I shopped around for treatment, and I wasn't really willing at that point to fully divulge my the extent of my drinking. When I was interviewed for places like Res 12, they didn't accept me because I was keeping up appearances and not really sharing the depths of my despair and my drinking. And so ultimately, I ended up going to Sundown and Ranch.
That's a good treatment facility.
It was a good treatment facility, and it was really good for me because I thought I was different.
Of course.
I thought I was going to a resort.
Hey, I've had that experience myself. An executive spa in my world.
I'm going to rest. I think I brought my tennis racket.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that at all. When I arrived there, I remember getting assigned to somebody who was a strike away from her 3 strikes for a prison sentence and or a lifetime in prison. And I was like, wow, I really don't belong here. They don't know who I am, and I put myself here. I had this whole perspective on. I checked myself in here. This wasn't somebody requiring me to do this now. Yet I knew that my job was contingent on it. And my job was, at that time in my life, the most important thing I had going.
Isn't it?
So I didn't want.
Yeah, isn't it interesting that the first here you are, big special agent, right? Getting connected with a person that is on their 3rd strike, a criminal. It's like, isn't that? I'm just saying that's so interesting that.
It was how it was supposed
to be. And she probably helped you a lot, didn't she?
She helped me a lot. My entire group helped me a lot in terms of making me understand that I truly belonged there. It wasn't a fluke that I was there and that I needed the help that I got there. And believe me, I tried to, I thought I could run wherever I wanted. I didn't think I had to abide by their rules until I almost got kicked out of the facility.
Right, that wouldn't have been good. No. Well, I really appreciate your openness and willingness to share what it was like for you to be an addict and what happened. And in our next session, I would like for you to think about talking about your the trauma, the fuel that fueled this destruction, what you call the despair, because you just said you didn't know what it was. So in our next session, I'd like you to do that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Healing Your Family Legacy here on the Experience of the Soul podcast channel. This channel is made possible because of listeners just like you. If you would like to support the channel with your tax-deductible contribution on an ongoing basis or through a one-time gift, head over to experienceofthesoul.com/support. Healing Your Family Legacy is copyright 2022, Dr. Donna Bevan-Lee, all rights reserved. Our theme music is composed by Dave Croft and used with permission. The Experience of the Soul podcast channel is a production of 818 Studios.
Hey friends, Sean here, your Experience of the Soul producer. I want to take a moment to tell you about something truly exciting. The Soulworks online community, created by your host, Cynthia Alice Anderson, and available on the Mighty Networks app. If you're looking for a place where you can explore your spiritual path, connect with others, and grow in a meaningful way, then this is for you. Soulworks is so much more than an online community. It's a safe, inclusive space for spiritual exploration, self-discovery, and personal transformation. Inside the community, you'll find everything from uplifting spiritual studies to soul-centered growth practices, meditations, affirmations, and so much more. It's a space where you'll always be supported and never judged. The best part, membership is free. You'll have access to powerful resources, inspiring content, and a supportive group of like-minded people who are all on their own unique spiritual journeys. And if you're ready to dive deeper, there are premium options available to enhance your experience with a live Monday night talk series and extended, deeper meditations. If you're seeking a place to connect, grow, and nurture your soul, we would love to have you join us in the Soulworks community and see where this journey can take you. Visit my.soulworkscommunity.com today.